Welcome to Wonders and Miracles podcast, where we celebrate miraculous moments in everyday lives. I'm Liza Lawrence. I'm glad to have you join me as we celebrate wonders and miracles together. All right, well, I am here today with Gary from Idaho, and he's going to share a miracle story that happened almost a year ago. Back in March, he had a brain bleed, and I'm excited to hear all the details of the story and the miraculous moments that he saw with this. So, Gary, thank you so much for being willing to share the story, and let's hear what you have.
All right, thank you. It's good to be here, and I'm happy to share. Not that my story is that amazing. I mean, it's amazing to me. Actually, sitting out in my kitchen, and I had a virtual meeting with a dental clinic that I manage in Merida, Mexico. And I was trying to connect with that meeting to the staff that I have there, and I was having troubles doing it. So I remember being frustrated at the poor Wi-Fi connection that they have down there. And that's the last thing I remember till the next day. But I can tell you the details that my family and friends have told me happened. So my wife, who also works, she had a meeting that morning at 9 o'clock. She's on the president's council with her job. And so it's kind of a critical meeting that she goes to, but she felt like she shouldn't go that morning. And she wasn't sure why, but she just felt like she wouldn't go. So she called and told them that she couldn't come. And so she came out of her bedroom. She kind of heard me moaning. And she came out and she found me lying on the living room floor. And I was convulsing, not violently, but having a mild seizure. I was foaming at the mouth and I was unconscious. Fortunately, she was home. She shouldn't have been home. I think it was, old tender mercy that she was prompted to stay home. She called 911, and of course the paramedics came and they scooped me up, not without a struggle. I guess I fought. I felt pretty good about myself. I fought off 4 paramedics. They said I was strong.
Wow.
But they had to sedate me. But another little miracle too was our neighbor. He has a police scanner, and so sometimes he'll just turn it on and listen to what's going on. And he randomly turned that on and heard a 911 call to our address. And so he knew it was our address. So he called his wife, and she came over to help support my wife. And she was able to help call some of our children and start the ball rolling that way. Plus he came, and I don't know who your audience is, but I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And some members of our church came and they gave me a blessing of healing. And they were able to do that after the paramedics were able to sedate me, so I wasn't thrashing around. And so that was kind of a tender mercy too, that he heard the call and came and was able to give me that blessing. And then they took me to the hospital. They took me to Madison Memorial. And I do remember vaguely waking up there. I could tell I was in a hospital because I could see a light. It wasn't the light. I mean, I wasn't going to the light, but I could see a light that was kind of like you would find in an operating room. And I remember thinking, oh, good, they're operating on my hip, my right hip. I had a congenital issue with my right hip, and all the cartilage in my right hip had gone away. And so I was scheduled to have that operated on. And I remember thinking, oh, good, they're doing my hip. But then I was out again. So I was there, and they diagnosed that I had had some type of a brain bleed or a stroke. And so the doctor there consulted with people in Ermac, which is in Idaho Falls, and we were in Rexburg. And they said, they do brain bleeds in Idaho Falls, but it has to be a certain type. And if it's too critical or too big, then they'll send you to University of Utah. So they made the decision they needed to send me to University of Utah, which was another, I think, tender mercy. I don't think I would have died if they'd sent me to Ermac, but they had the facilities and the knowledgeable people there, neurosurgeons there, to ultimately make a diagnosis of what was going on. So they sent me to University of Utah Medical Center, and they checked me into the neurocritical care unit. And that's where I became conscious when I was there. And that was another thing that was a little traumatic for me because I woke up in the University of Utah. I attended Brigham Young University. So University of Utah is our arch rivals. And I woke up, and out my hospital window, I could see Rice-Eccles Stadium, which is where their football team plays. And I thought to myself, okay, this is hell. I said, I know I wasn't a great person, but I tried to do my best, and I really ended up in hell, and it's Rice-Eccles Stadium. So that was a little traumatic to wake up at the University of Utah. But they were having a hard time, and I felt horrible when I woke up. I mean, I wasn't really myself, to be honest with you, but they had a hard time diagnosing what had happened. They sent the scans from Idaho, where they're taking the scans, to the University of Utah. They ran a battery of tests. They did MRIs and some other things, CAT scan, That didn't show anything. Everything looked normal.
Hmm.
And finally, the neurosurgeon, he said, we can do one other thing. We can do an angiogram, which is where they run a lead up here. They ran it up the femoral artery to the base of the brain, and then they shoot dye in there, and it takes a picture. And that was the way that they diagnosed what had happened. And I had an AV dural fistula. And I'm not a doctor, so I'm not going to try to explain what it is, but it's an abnormal connection between the blood vessels and the major artery in the brain. And it's not something I was born with, probably. It's something that can kind of come and go, but it was massive. It covered the whole right side of my brain. The neurosurgeon, he said it was the most complicated, he called it a monstrosity. It was the most complicated one of these he'd ever seen. And he wasn't sure what to do. They have a procedure that they do. It's called an embolization. What they do is they try to go in and stop the blood flow to these arteries, because the blood is flowing contrary to the way that it should. And that's why I ultimately had the brain bleed. The blood flows backwards, and it creates a great amount of pressure, and one of the blood vessels ruptured. I did have some deficits. Fortunately, they didn't last. I had a droopy face and a numb lip, but those went away pretty quickly. Within a few days, I was pretty much feeling normal that way. I didn't feel normal in many other ways, but felt all those deficits went away. So I was very fortunate. Another tender mercy that really the thing bled just enough that they got me to where I needed to be, but not so much that it caused serious long-term effects or even death. So anyway, he looked at that and he said, we'll go in and do this embolization. He described the embolizations. They go back up like an angiogram, but they attach an instrument. Instead of shooting dye, well, they do shoot dye, but they put a little instrument on there, and then they get into the area where the fistula is, and what they try to do is block off those blood vessels, so the blood will go back into the artery and it'll flow in a normal way and take the pressure off the brain. And so he went in and he started this process, and they shoot this stuff. He described it as super glue. It's called onyx, but he basically said it's just like super glue. And so he started it. And he didn't do very long. And of course, I'm under, they put you completely under when they do this procedure. And when they got done, he explained to my wife, and I said, look, this thing is just too complicated. He said, I can't do this by myself. He said, I've got to have another set of eyes on this when I go in to do this procedure. And I'm not available with my associate for 3 more weeks.
Wow.
So, and he said, I don't want you going back to Idaho because you're at a high risk to have the same type of brain bleed that you had before. You don't have to stay in the hospital, but I want you close by in case something happens. We can get you here quickly. Fortunately, my dad lives in Lehigh, which is 20 minutes from University of Utah Medical Center. So they released me from the hospital. I was actually in the hospital for almost 2 weeks in the critical care unit there while they monitored what was going on. And I went down to Lehigh, and I had to wait 3 weeks there. Like I said, they would not let me come home. And he said, we'll schedule this procedure. My associate will be with me. He said it might take 2 or 3 or 4 procedures to correct this thing. I don't think we can do it in one procedure just because it's massive and it's complicated. And the whole time I was down in Lehigh, I had massive headaches, very lightheaded. My thinking was pretty much clear. My wife will tell you my thinking's never very clear. So my thinking was pretty clear, very lightheaded. My vision wasn't great, and headaches, and I just didn't feel good. I felt bad. I mean, I could walk, and I would try to get a little bit of exercise. My wife and I would go on walks, short walks, 15, 20 minutes max. So that was kind of a frustrating time to be down there, not really knowing what was going on. We sought a second opinion. I have a friend who's a doctor. My best friend from high school is a doctor down in Utah. And so we called him, and he was quite astonished to learn what had happened. And he said, you're lucky you're not dead, based on what you're telling me. But anyway, he gave us a reference to a man that he knows who's a neuroradiologist. And we got the scans. We sent them to him to get a second opinion. He'd done this procedure, these embolizations, and dealt with these fistulas for over 30 years. And he said the diagnosis was correct. They're doing the right thing. You can be confident in the treatment. Stay the course. He goes, I know the doctor. He'll do a good job. And the other option, he said, is we can do open brain surgery. But he said that's kind of a last resort if we do it that way. If they can't clear this up with the embolization, then they can go in open brain and do some things. And the last resort is to do radiation to try to dry it up. So he was pretty candid with us. And he said, look, it's serious. You could have some major deficits when they get done with this. I mean, you could lose function. You need to plan your life to not be normal like you have been. It may affect your employment, and in certain cases, it can't even, this procedure can cause death, but it's definitely the best course of action to take.
When you heard that, what were you thinking? What were your thoughts, you and your wife?
Well, of course, we had some serious conversations, and I started talking to her about make sure she knew where the life insurance policy was and how to file for that. And we talked about things that were most important to us. Of course, I told her I don't really care about anything except I want you guys to be true and faithful to what we know is true, to the gospel and of Jesus Christ. And you'll be financially, you're going to be fine. So you don't need to worry about that. But, make sure the kids know how much I love them. And of course, I had private conversations with each one of my kids and told them I said, I think it's unlikely that I'm going to die or have any massive, but it could happen. And so, yeah, we talked about all those things of if I did die. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't afraid to die. I did not want to die. I mean, trust me, I did not want to die. I don't feel like I'm ready to die yet. There's things I need to do. I need to become better for one thing, but there's things that I felt like I needed to do. But I really wasn't scared to die just because of the faith that we have, but did not want to. We have 6 children. We've got almost 9 grandchildren. Of course, I want to spend more time with them and do things with them. But we had those conversations. And I think the biggest conversation we had as far as, worldly things was I had just bought a new fly rod. I had only used it once. And so I said, okay, this has got to go to a good home. So I settled on my son, Kyle, because he likes to fish more than the others. Okay, Kyle, you're going to get my fly rod and you have to promise me that you'll use it. $900 fly rod that I used one time, So you better get out there and use it. Yeah, that was kind of sobering. Those 3 weeks, not feeling well at all, and basically in bed most of the time, but waiting for this procedure was kind of sobering time for us. And my wife, fortunately, her work was really good. She did come back to Rexburg 1 week and worked, but for 2 weeks she was right there by my side, which was nice for me to have. And I have a daughter that lives down there too, and so she and her husband were there. But so I had family around. But it was nice to have family around during that time for sure. On Easter Sunday, I went to church, and I wasn't feeling the same way. I wasn't feeling great. And we came home, we had an Easter dinner that my wife and daughter prepared. And we're sitting around my dad's living room, and some friends of ours from Rexburg, Ron and Jill Anderson, they came by, and we started talking. And I just, in that time, in that afternoon, I felt kind of normal. I told Ron, I said, man, I almost feel like my old self. I just feel better. So the procedure was coming up. I think it was the Tuesday after Easter, whatever date that was. So a couple of days later, my wife and I are driving up to University of Utah. Of course, we had a sobering conversation all the way up there because, of course, they tell you that all the risks of this procedure, and death is one of them. So we're talking about that and going over some things as we get there, check in, typical protocol for a surgery where they're going to put you under. And the last thing I remember is the anesthesiologist saying, okay, here we go. And, then I'm out. And so they go in, and there's these 2 radioneurologists going to do this procedure. And they said it would take about 2 to 3 hours. They thought it could take a little bit longer, but depending on how complicated things were. But after about an hour, I actually kind of came to in the operating room. Okay. And I heard the doctor say, it's gone. And so then I was kind of out of it, and they wheeled me into the recovery room. When I came to, he called my wife from the operating room, and he said, I've got exceedingly great news for you. He said, we went in to do the procedure on this massive monstrosity, and when we got in there, it was gone. It was nowhere to be found, not a trace of it.
That is amazing.
Yes. Yeah, it was. And so he said, we went in and we took pictures of the right side of the brain. We went and took pictures of the left side of the brain. We wanted to make sure that what we were really seeing. And then they brought me into the recovery room. And when I came to, my wife was talking to the doctor, and he had a picture of my brain up there. And he said, they were looking at this picture of my clear brain. he said to her, his brain is as healthy as yours or mine.
Hmm.
And of course, my wife said, no, I've known this man for over 30 years. His brain has never been healthy, and certainly not as healthy as mine. Anyway, I said, if you've made me better than I was, doctor, I'll pay you twice as much. Anyway, but his point was, he said, this thing cleared up. And he said, I'm not sure how. And we asked him, my wife asked him, have you ever seen this happen before? And he said, no. She said, did you have an expectation that this would happen? He said, of course not, or I would not have put your husband under general anesthesia. I would have just gone in and checked if we thought, well, maybe there's a chance to get cleared. He said, no, we had no expectation. We expected to find the same complicated fistula that we'd seen before, and we expected it to take 2 or 3 or 4 different procedures to clear this thing up. And so he was astonished, and I kind of shared that I had kind of felt good on Easter afternoon. And this doctor, I don't know what religion he was. I don't know if he was Christian. He was clearly from India, but he said, and he called it an Easter gift. That's what he called it. He called it an Easter gift. But he said, sometimes it helps to have luck on your side. And I said, well, I don't think there was any luck in this. I mean, I think that there was some divine intervention. And I think what you did the first time, maybe it did the trick. Maybe your hands were guided when you were the first procedure. But I will tell you this, that through this whole ordeal, because of our faith and the people we know, I mean, we had literally, hundreds of people praying for me. And you can really feel the power of those prayers. And that was astonishing to me. I'm glad I went through the experience just to be able to feel that and see how people rallied around us. The local people in our local church rallied around us. I had my colleagues and friends that I work with in Mexico and in Central America and Chile were all sending me greetings through Facebook and WhatsApp, and my name was in about 15 different temples, around the world. And so you could feel the power of all the faith, the combined faith of so many people. And of course, my family. That was a neat thing to go through, to be able to see that happen and see people rally around you. And it was really sobering to me. In fact, I got we got a message from one of our neighbors, and she said, praying for you, Gary, hope everything's good. And she had just been diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. It had spread to her kidneys. I mean, she had her diagnosis was terminal.
Yeah.
She's still with us right now, but her diagnosis is terminal. And I wanted to message her back and say, why are you praying for me? You need to be able to focus all your energies on you. But it's just amazing how people rally around one another in difficult times, and the combined faith of so many people. Really, I believe that's what helped in this situation. I mean, I know every situation doesn't have an ending like this.
Right.
I've got good friends who've had harder things than this, and the outcome has not been a miracle. It's been death. And so I know it doesn't always happen like this. But I think even if I had passed away, I think the experience was faith promoting.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even my family would have said, yeah, of course we're sad he's gone, but it was a faith promoting thing to see how people came together and to see how people rally around one another in difficult circumstances.
I do think that is such a beautiful thing. And I see it all the time when others need that support, how we do rally around with prayer and fasting and just putting all that faith and energy towards that person does have miraculous healing effects, I do believe.
Absolutely. Yeah. I've read studies. They weren't faith-based studies. And so they attribute the prayer and the fasting and the good vibes. Okay?
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's something to that. It helps you have a more positive outlook when you know that many people are concerned for your welfare. Mm-hmm. But we obviously also believe in a higher power. We believe in God, and we believe that He can heal, that the Savior can heal us, and you always have to be ready to accept whatever God has in store for you. Mm-hmm. And it may not be a miraculous outcome like it was in this circumstance, but regardless of the outcome, as you watch people rally around one another in that way, it makes whatever the outcome is bearable.
Mm-hmm. I agree. So has your life changed? Did this change your perspective on life or anything where you kind of had a new outlook after this?
Absolutely. Yeah. My prayers are twice as long as they used to be. And they're not prayers of gratitude, although I do thank God every day. But what has happened is I have found a list of people who are in similar circumstances. And I pray for them every night. People I know, people I don't know, friends of friends of mine. So I've got this list of people that I pray for because I really felt like that was something that blessed me during that time, was having somebody that a lot of people I didn't know, but willing to offer up a prayer on my behalf. So certainly my faith has been increased that way. And I feel a sense in the responsibility to help other people in that way. I certainly have a new appreciation for the fragileness of life. Hopefully I appreciated it before. I mean, we could be gone in a second, and we've all lost people close to us in tragic accidents or sudden illnesses that happen. So, but when you come face to face with the reality, hey, I could die tomorrow. It changes. Something changes in you a little bit. And so, yeah, hopefully I'm a little bit kinder. I think I just have an appreciation for life more than I did. And I have always thought that life was a blessing and that we're here for a purpose. But yeah, definitely, I definitely see things in a different way. I just had a friend of mine, his daughter gave birth to a baby and they knew early on in the pregnancy, this baby had serious health issues. And so she was born and she did live for a day and then she passed away. But I was able to reach out to my friend and talk to him. And I think I did it in a way that was more compassionate than maybe I would have done before. And was able to have a different feeling about how I expressed sympathy and sorrow to him. It wasn't just going through the motions. I mean, I really felt sorry for him and what he was going through.
And I think that is common when we do suffer. That's maybe that point of that pain and suffering and sorrow that we've experienced. We can then have compassion towards others, a deeper understanding, which is valuable. So
yeah, absolutely. I think people appreciate that. I mean, when something bad happens to somebody, you can go and say, I'm sorry. And I feel sorry for you, but you really don't have an understanding of how they feel. And so I think people need to hear you say, I'm sorry. I don't know how you're feeling, but I'm sorry for you, and I'll pray for you. And, you can lean on me if you need to. And I think people appreciate that, rather than running up and saying, boy, I know how you feel. But when you really probably don't know how they feel. And even if you've had an experience where it's been life, you're teetering on the edge of life or death, you're not really sure how somebody else feels, but you can always offer sincere compassion. I think I've changed in that way. I think I have a better capacity to offer, sincere compassion. In fact, I'll give you, for instance, I had to let 2 people go from, the foundation, 2 of my employees, which was a very difficult decision. I wasn't the ultimate one that made the decision, but, I speak Spanish and I had to have these conversations in Spanish. And I felt like, having gone through this, I was much more compassionate having to tell somebody that they weren't going to have their job. And so I think it extends beyond just compassion for people who may be going through a difficult time physically. I think it extends, maybe your compassion's better, just generally speaking.
Yeah. To humanity. Did they ever tell you what caused this? Do they know? Is this?
They don't really know. I asked that question to 2 different radioneurologists. They don't really know. One of them told me it could have been a congenital thing, and not that the thing was there since birth, but you could have had kind of a congenital weakness that and had a proclivity that this was going to happen at some point in time. One of the other radioneurologists told me, he said, sometimes if you get severely dehydrated, it creates blood clots in your sinuses, and those blood clots get up into your brain, and they can create this problem. And so he said, do you ever get severely dehydrated? And I love to fish, and I probably get severely dehydrated lots of days when I'm out fishing in 80 or 90 degree weather, and I don't drink much water.
Yeah.
So I've become tried to be more cognizant of making sure that I hydrate all the time. He said, I have no idea if that's what happened in your case. We're never going to know. I did tell them that I didn't, because they asked me if I had any symptoms. And I said, well, not that I know of, but about 6 months before this, if it was really quiet, like when I went to bed and I was trying to go to sleep, I could hear my heart beating and blood rushing in my head.
Really?
It wasn't enough to keep me awake, but I could hear it. And one of the neurologists said, yeah, that's one of the first signs of one of these fistulas, is that rushing of the blood, because the blood is running contrary to what it should. And it's got a lot of pressure. And so you can hear that. I will tell you this, I went back down to the radioneurologist after they did the procedure, and he gave me a clean bill of health. And I will mention this too. He said that when I came out from that second procedure, he said to me, you just got your life back.
Wow.
Because really, I think all of them thought that even if they cleared this problem up, I would maybe have some kind of deficits, or maybe wouldn't be able to do what I had done, or maybe they wouldn't be able to clear it up to the point where I could go back to normal activities. And so he just said, you got your life back. This is not the normal thing for what you had. He said, I want to see you in 6 months. And that 6 months was in this past November. I went down, it was the first week of November, and they did another angiogram. They went up into my brain and used the thing, they shot the dye up, and he said, you're good. He said, nothing, no problems. Your brain looks great. And he said, I don't need to see you for 2 years. So I want you to come back in 2 years and we'll do this again. He gave me a clean bill of health. I'm pretty much back to just all my normal activities. So I feel super fortunate and very blessed.
That is amazing.
To be where I am. Yeah.
Yeah. That is miraculous. That's a beautiful story. I love it. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. One of the things my wife and I've talked about this, and I think we feel kind of a sense of responsibility, not to just go around talking about it all the time, but I think we feel like we were blessed in a miraculous way. And so we kind of feel a sense that we need to tell the story when it's appropriate, and certainly in a very humble way, because I feel very humbled by the outcome. I feel very humbled by all the people that were concerned for me. Don't feel any sense of I was blessed in this way or saved in this way because I'm such a great guy or I've got great things to do. I just think for whatever reason, the faith, the prayers, and God's compassion for me gave me this outcome. And I'm really grateful for it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I do appreciate you sharing, because the reason I started this podcast was to uplift others and share those moments that God is with us. Sometimes we don't recognize that He is here helping. And these stories, I believe, can share that message that He is aware of us. He's here with us and helping us. And everybody's story looks different. The fact that this was your beautiful miracle story doesn't mean, like you said, others won't have that same outcome, but God is still there and with them in the way that they need.
And I'm glad you mentioned that in the way that you did, because my wife has got a list of she calls them tender mercies. Mm-hmm. So ways that God was looking out for us leading up to the event and then all the way through it. She's got them written down. And so I believe that God's in our life all the time, if we allow Him to be.
Yes.
We can certainly tune Him out by our actions and other things. But if we allow God to be in our lives, He'll be there. Mm-hmm. And whether we actually see it or not, He is. And if you look back, I think most people can see, okay, there was some divine blessing there.
Yeah, I agree. Well, thank you. This was wonderful.
Thank you. My pleasure. I'm glad that you reached out to me, and I'm happy to share my story. If it can uplift somebody or help somebody, I'm grateful for that. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this miracle story. Please subscribe to my channel if you liked it. You can also find me on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify,